Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by robotic process automation pioneer SS&C Blue Prism. Digital transformation has the potential to reshape the way companies service their customers, engage their employees, and manage their operations. Whether you're looking to develop strategies, tactics, or best practices to positively impact the future of work, or you're curious to see how other companies have successfully navigated their digital transformation programs, then this podcast is for you. We're here to help you transform now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Hairston with SS&C Blue Prism. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. Today, I'm excited to have as my guest my colleague, Brian Hesse, one of the senior directors in our product management organization at SS&C Blue Prism. Brian is specifically focused on the BPM solution at SS&C, which is called Chorus. And we will be discussing what BPM is all about and the significant role that it is playing in organizations who are reinventing the way work gets done. Welcome, Brian. Why don't you start us off with an introduction?
Thanks, Brad. I've been in the product management field for 30 years. I joined a company called DST in 2015, which was purchased by SS&C in 2018. And then our division got merged with Blue Prism when SS&C bought Blue Prism back a couple years ago. I've worked at large companies like Sprint doing product management. I've worked at small companies like iModules and ePay doing product management. So I spent almost my entire career doing some sort of product management. Excited to tell you more about BPM.
Fantastic. And I, too, am glad that we are taking some time here to shine a light on BPM. I will raise my right hand and acknowledge that we have not given enough attention to this solution on our podcast. We tend to be a bit RPA heavy, but that's understandable given the origins of our podcast. Our portfolio has expanded to include now both RPA and BPM. It's absolutely time for us to talk about the synergies between these two solutions, both of which are in the area of intelligent automation. So, Brian, with BPM being a primary focus of yours over the last 8.5 years, what is your perception of the BPM market right now and how companies are leveraging this technology to transform their business?
What's interesting is that pre-COVID, a lot of analysts had been saying that BPM was fairly ubiquitous. And just some history here, BPM originally was an academic pursuit that started about 40, 50 years ago. And then technologies were created to bring that academic pursuit into reality. And so a lot of BPM solutions came around in the 1990s, which is when our solution came about. But what's interesting is that COVID, I think, turned everything upside down. First of all, thanks to COVID, we have this new decentralized or hybrid idea of how work is done. Sometimes you have people working in a home office, or you may have them working at a coffee house. The old model where everyone worked together in the same area isn't really used as much anymore. And so in the old world where you use paper or email or stuff like that, they became a liability because you might now have been hundreds of miles away at a different location. And so they realized, okay, we need to figure out how to use technology to be able to handle this distributed model. And because everyone was around, we wanted to make sure that everyone was doing things the same way. We didn't want one group in this part of the world doing it this way, and this part of the world doing it a different way for the same type of experience. And so BPM has grown again since COVID. And now analysts have changed some of the terms. They talk about business process orchestration or digital process automation. Those are all just new words for business process management. And so the way that the companies are leveraging BPM now, they used to do things very simple like onboarding or claims management, maybe maintenance. Those were pretty typical use cases of BPM pre-COVID. Post-COVID, and thanks to a lot of the BPM solutions like us adding no code application development into it so that your business users can design processes easier, they're finding lots of new ways to make it work. So some of our clients are using it to create applications for their employees or their customers or their vendors. They're using it for PTO requests. They're using it for not in good order items. It used to be a call center person would have to call you and say, hey, I need this piece of paper because you forgot it. And then you would have to mail it in or figure out a way to scan or fax it over. Now they can just send you to a website app and you can upload it. And now they can continue on with their work. So what's really happened is that the decentralization has shown the need to get rid of as much paper as possible. It's just too much of a risk in a decentralized organization. So by bringing more BPM, it helps manage those risks. And so just as an example, we had a client that went live 4 days before the lockdown that hit the United States in March, 4 days live. And what's interesting is that they had to shift from a call center to distributed 7,000 employees using our software within 4 days of it going live. And with that work to home, they were able to not miss a beat. Those processes were trained. Everything was going smoothly. They went from everyone being in a call center to everyone being at home, and they didn't see any changes in any of those. And normally something that disruptive would cause all kinds of issues.
That's really interesting. I really like the fact that you're putting governance and structure and it's in essence kind of codifying a process. But now talk to me about going further and about redesigning the process. How do companies achieve that with BPM?
So another buzzword that we heard many years ago is digital transformation. Everyone was in a digital transformation in the 2018, 2019, 2020 timeframe. And what was funny about it is that a lot of organizations saw no value in their digital transformation because they really didn't do it. They did a couple things. They either looked at it holistically, which we would recommend, and said, okay, this is too big, too expensive, we're not going to do it. Or little pockets of the organization did it. And so maybe one organization took a technology and did some transformation to their work, but it didn't actually translate to overall savings for the company because maybe what they did in their own little universe affected another group. And so work got harder in a different organization because there wasn't that kind of talk or that overall view. We always say that good process takes time. It's not something that you can just snap your fingers and move into. And it should always begin with their customer's journey. Your process management really should look at how you're talking with your customers and what is their journey. So for example, let's say you're an insurance company and you're trying to automate your claims process. Start with what your customers go through to submit a claim or even purchase insurance, submit a claim, get paid. Think about that and then design your process around that. Because what other companies do, they're like, what's easiest for me? What's quickest for me? Well, that may be great for you, but that doesn't help your customer loyalty. That doesn't help your revenue growth because your customers are the one who are driving additional opportunities to buy more products. So start with that customer journey. There's a great quote from McKinsey that organizations need to envision and implement holistic optimization programs to maximize return on that investment. Though it is easier and faster to implement automation projects in silos, such an approach is inherently flawed. And that's what we saw in the digital transformation world. The ones that did in silos didn't see any advantage from them. So fundamentally, that redesign needs to start looking at the overall picture and then take that customer journey into consideration. If you look at process redesign that way, you're going to be much more effective. And then you can use tools like process mining and things like that as your processes have been established to go and then refine them over time by using those tools to make your process better after you have that initial experience.
Yeah, I really do like that holistic view of processes. And I know McKinsey is not alone. The other top advisories are all saying the same thing. They're saying that in today's business environment, we can't just nitpick processes and re-engineer little portions of it. We have to look at the whole thing. We have to be as end to end as we can be. And so it's neat to see how BPM really supports that. That's really an enabling technology to doing that well. Brian, you've already shared a couple stories, but can you share maybe a couple more customer success stories that involve BPM?
Absolutely. In fact, one kind of ties into that whole kind of process redesign we just talked about. We have a customer that's an international bank and it has locations in 37 countries. So you've got a very dynamic experience there because you have different currencies, you have different languages, you have different cultural norms when it comes to doing process, things like that. And so this commercial bank wanted to create a process and reduce the complexity of what's called their dynamic currency conversion, or DCC is what it's usually known as. Because what they found is all these different countries were doing it differently. And so what they did is they took Chorus and looked at the process in each of all the organizations and created a single process that worked for all the countries. And so for the first time ever in their history, they had a single process to do DCC. And it was implemented across 37 countries. And so it reduced their onshore FTE. It removed the cost of all these different processes being done differently and being able to bring them together at the end to make sure they matched. It helped their auditability and took away risk because it wasn't manually done, that DCC anymore. The software took care of that. So they saw some great returns by having a common process across the countries for that. And BPM's one way to be able to do that.
That's a really good story. What's another one you can share?
Another one that is more recent with us, there's an insurance company that focuses on long-term healthcare. And the way that they were set up prior to using Chorus was everything was hand done. They had forms that were submitted via an online portal or physical mail or through faxes, lots of faxes. And each document had to be manually scanned, and then they were placed in folders, and the folders were passed, and then they managed all the tasks in a spreadsheet, and sometimes even in Microsoft Teams. And what they found is that there were too many disparate ways of things were happening. And there was way too much paper and way too much work on transforming paper into something digital. So they were having people do work, then rework, and then rework again, just to get it from one design of experience to the one they needed to be able to process it through software. And then to boot, they had 75 different communications back out to their customers, depending on what was going on. And those had to be manually selected. And so the employee had to know, based on all this criteria of all these documents, which letter had to go out. So lots of times spent training and educating their contact center what needs to go. And so they brought in Chorus. And first of all, not only did it streamline all those multiple copies of everything, because when it was brought in, Chorus could index it right from the start. If it was an email or something like that, or a fax, or from their digital portal, we just imported those right in as APIs into Chorus. Anything else was sent through our intelligent document process automation solution, and then indexed and translated into metadata that was imported right into Chorus. So right there, they took out that whole entire manual experience at the front, created an experience that the workflow then was the same across all their business units that were working in their long-term care insurance policy program. And then, even though they didn't reduce the number of communications all that much, they let the software pick it based on the criteria versus having to have someone say, okay, all this is there, so I need to pick this letter. The communication solution in Chorus was able to create content snippets that, based on different criteria that went through, picked the right paragraphs and drafted that letter automatically, sent it to a quality queue to just have someone check it, make sure it was right, and then could be mailed or emailed off to their customer. And so what they found is that their processing time was reduced by 3/4. So it was down 78%. I think that's just an amazing way of looking at how you can, by automating and letting software do those decision-making tool experiences for you and creating a common experience, how you can save money and time. And overall, it makes your customers happy because they got their information 3 times faster.
Those are such great stories. So Brian, McKinsey did a survey last year of over 400 companies using automation in a significant way. And they found that the second and third most pervasive automation technologies being used in those companies were RPA and BPM. That being said, do you find that most companies are using these two technologies together or separately?
Great question. So honestly, I think most companies are using them separately today. And predominantly that's because historically RPA was sold to IT shops and BPM was sold to business people. Unless the company has taken that initial step of saying, okay, we need to look at automation holistically, most likely the BPM is sitting in an operations center or a business unit. Your RPA people are sitting in an IT shop.
We did a couple of webinars earlier this year talking about BPM and RPA and how they are better together. And I did a participant poll at the very beginning, and most companies said that they are not using them together.
But I think that's changing. And I like to use an analogy when I talk about process automation in the future. And I think of it like a tool belt. You're wearing your tool belt, and in there you have different pockets or you have hooks to hold different types of tools, things like that. And you think of BPM as a tool, but it's also the orchestration that ties everything together. So it's also the main belt. And then RPA is sitting in there, and intelligent document processing is in there. Process mining is in there, all these automation tools. And if you look at, okay, what is the best tool to use for this part of my automation experience? Let BPM be that overall that brings everything together, connects all the disparate systems, takes care of things that aren't necessarily just done on the computer,
Mhm.
and takes into account that customer journey. And then you bring out the right tool as part of that end-to-end process based on what makes the most sense. So there are times absolutely when I would recommend using RPA to
Mhm.
make a task, especially those mundane, everyday tasks that just need to happen. There's no reason to have a human sit there and copy data from one screen to another. Perfect example of using RPA as a right tool. But you have your BPM orchestrate that. So the human does what they need to do, then it sends it to the bot to do what it needs to do. Then BPM can then update all the systems that need to happen, post it. You think about automation that way,
Mhm.
the ability to have those end-to-end automation experiences that better align with that customer journey. We have one client, because they're looking at it holistically, they saw their same day processing of work go from 60% to 100%. So every night, all of their work is always done. That happened from bringing all these solutions together. Another client saw 18,000 hours back as a benefit by bringing these technologies together and looking at it holistically and saving that time to be able to put people to do other things that needed to get done.
Mm. Wow. Let's dive a little bit deeper because I think it would be helpful just to unpack some of the specific benefits by using them together. Let's start by talking about how RPA can complement BPM and make it better.
Sure. RPA automates tasks really, really well. I talked about taking those mundane and repetitive tasks that can consume man hours and lots of them. There are a lot of times when people would do what's called swivel chair, which means I'm typing something from one system into Salesforce, or I'm typing it into my legacy record keeping system, things like that. Great opportunity to bring in bots and have that stuff be automated. Even reaching into legacy systems that maybe don't have APIs or good web services. I'm still amazed, particularly in financial services, how many mainframe systems there still are out there. Bots are a fantastic way to connect to those. And so if you think of, again, BPM as that overall process orchestration and experience, those are great areas where they complement each other because those are things that BPM really doesn't do well because it has to usually involve a human and that takes up time
Yeah.
and money.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think the virtual API capability of RPA is a really, really nice addition to BPM so that those legacy systems or those mainframe systems, like you mentioned, that are harder for BPM to integrate with, you'd have to go and develop coding and what have you. You can use RPA to go and get that in a much simpler way. Okay, now the flip side. If you're a company that's only using RPA, how can adding BPM to the mix be of benefit to you?
I think the big part is looking at the end-to-end process. Instead of thinking of a series of tasks and trying to tie them together, if you holistically design your process end to end, you aren't worrying about these small tasks one at a time and making sure that they hand off properly because BPM does that really, really well. We like to say that BPM gives the right work to the right person or digital worker at the right time. It also is really good at multiple decision-making options versus just one at a time. And so
Mhm.
you could actually, and we have had clients do this, create complete straight through processing. We have a client that does claims management that if a claim is below a certain level, it goes through the entire way and never touches a human. And within 3 to 5 days, their customer has a check from when the claim was made because they said, here's all the decisions. It follows those logic as part of that process and then puts out a check at the end. It also creates that consistency across business units and locations and experiences. A COE can do that, but then now you have people managing that, whereas a BPM process software can do that. And then you don't have that additional expense and you let your COE do what they do best. And so taking that customer centric rather than a technology approach, that's what BPM is all about.
That's really helpful, Brian. So going back to the McKinsey survey that I mentioned, their findings seem to support the idea that companies are using an increasing number of automation capabilities together. It sounds like that's what you're seeing across the customers that you talk to, that they're beginning to use more and more of these technologies so that they can automate and streamline a broader set of business operations. Is that true?
Absolutely. But here's what I think is going to cause issues in the future. So you have one organization looking at their needs and buying stuff and not worrying about how it affects the other organization or the overall. You're going to end up with a bunch of technologies that either are incompatible at some point, or you're going to end up creating a bunch of custom code to get them to talk to each other.
Yep.
So it makes more sense to look at things holistically, maybe have one or two vendors. First of all, that gives the organizations much more control over their supply chain. And it also lowers their total cost of ownership because they have one or two people to deal with versus 10 or 15. And so it gets rid of those issues as well as saves them money in the long run.
That makes a lot of sense. Brian, the intersection of automation and process mining has been a really big boost for this industry. Can you speak to that?
And this is one of the best things that I think that have happened in our industry in quite some time, because it used to be so difficult to get this information. You used to have to sit, and I've actually done this. I sat at a contact center with a stopwatch and a recorder and sat there and recorded what people were doing. The ability to do process mining and task mining, I think, is huge. SS&C itself, we've integrated our process mining in both BPM and RPA. So it doesn't matter if you start in RPA or start with BPM, you have that ability to optimize. It also has advantages of speeding up the development process and providing post-deployment monitoring and reporting, because oftentimes you may not know where your bottlenecks are, or even if your process is designed properly. You think it is based on that customer journey, and you might find that, oh, there's a loop here that happens 90% of the time. So something in our customer journey is even off. So we can go and have those discussions with the people that need it. So there's something that's causing this to happen. And it used to take days, weeks, months to figure those out in the future. And here it is. You import some data, and within a couple of hours, you have them documented.
In addition to sitting with the stopwatch, my mind goes to the get everybody in a conference room and put butcher paper all over the walls and talk through, okay, then what happens? Then what happens? People scribbling and writing and debating. And that's such a beatdown. So,
I feel lots of Post-it notes that way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Brian, you are from the product management area, so I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to talk about how BPM will evolve in the years to come. Can you give us a peek into some of the enhancements that your team is working on?
Well, post-COVID, the analysts are telling us that they now expect BPM to grow by 20% over the next 7 years. And I'll be honest, we already are seeing that in our sales funnel. Just the growth is happening. So a few things that we're working on specifically, Chorus, we're working on making upgrades easier and simpler. We're moving to a microservices and componentization experience with our software so that clients, rather than have to taking a single upgrade, could upgrade just the part of the software that has the newest modern features added to it, which will make it much easier to create those upgrades experiences because you're only focusing on a little bit of the software versus a big, huge piece of software. We're going to continue moving to no code. Our UX builder, no code application developer solution is definitely where we see a trend of things moving, with more and more citizen developers getting involved. In BPM, normally you'd have an admin or a designer that would do a lot of that. But even in today's world, they're pushing that even down further. So you're using UX builder and no code apps to allow everyday users to create those apps to help make their world faster, easier, better for their customers. We're also seeing and working on more pre-designed connectors. So not everyone is familiar with how to write an API or a service call. And there's some of them that our clients are using regularly. Maybe that's Salesforce. So by having a pre-designed Salesforce connector in Chorus, it takes away that need of being able to understand how to do a web call to Salesforce. You just drop it in there, and then all you do is say, here's the pieces of data that I want to go back and forth, making it much easier to train people. We talked about process mining. I think it's going to continue to grow. And so we're doing even more to bring that into the wheelhouse here and being able to take clients who have, even some who have 30 and 35 years of processes to even figure out how to optimize those. And then lastly, and I think this is probably one that most of your listeners would probably guess, is Gen AI. Artificial intelligence is turning this industry upside down. What's interesting is we're not sure how yet, because many companies are saying, no, we're not sure we want that in our stack just yet. So how do you create an experience that for companies that can't do that, but others that want to, and be able to make that optional? Again, I think the componentization microservices experience is one of the things that's going to help us have that, so that the clients who want to use generative AI experiences can, versus moving to have it all in that software and just try to figure out how to isolate it. So the microservices will help there as well. So those are the 5 big areas that Chorus is working on, I would say, for the next 8 to 12 months. And we'll have more at the Deliver conference happening later this year in our product launch then in October.
All of that sounds really good, Brian. Definitely excited to see how it shakes up and how more customers can begin to take advantage of BPM as it expands, what it's capable of doing. So I have one final question for you. There are clearly a lot of big players in the BPM space. I don't have to name them. I think most people will think of one or two immediately. I wonder if you could perhaps just talk about Chorus BPM and some of the differentiators you have that enable you to do well in this market with all the competition that's out there.
Well, one of our biggest differentiators based on our history is that we are well ingrained and understand the financial services, banking, insurance, and healthcare industries. We have a 35-year history with them. We understand the challenges that they're under. We understand the risks. We understand how the government rules apply to them. So particularly for clients in those areas, we have insider knowledge essentially of those industries that really put us above our competitors. Where most of our competitors are tending to be generalists, historically we fit there. Now, thanks to our connection with Blue Prism, we are seeing our software move into other areas like government and manufacturing and retail and things like that. Another one is we actually have a completely inside built communications platform. Our competitors in this space, they either have very minimal, okay, you can send out a text message or you can send out a standard email that's pre-designed a certain way only, or they plug into big communication programs like Thundercloud, I think it is, or Stream, things like that, which may be far too big for what a lot of clients are needing to be able to communicate. But we have one that's completely integrated with our system, to being able to send out and then accept back communications from their clients, and right into where that communication went out, they can start the process up right from there. It doesn't have to restart by bringing in a new piece of communication, for example.
Right.
And then lastly is our private cloud. That's a huge benefit, particularly to our client bases that are worried about security. They don't have to own the infrastructure on their side. That definitely reduces their cost overall, but they aren't worried about some of the public cloud issues that might be going on. We can put Chorus, of course, in AWS or things like that, but particularly in North America, where we have our Canadian and USA data centers, our private cloud really offers a very secure platform at a reasonable price that allows clients who are particularly in highly regulated and risk-averse areas to keep it in kind of a public cloud, but still really a private cloud experience.
Okay. Well, Brian, this has been educational for me, and I know it will be educational for our listeners. Thank you for being on. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on BPM and what really makes it thrive in today's environment. I am so excited about the synergies between BPM and RPA. I think this is a missing piece that a lot of companies are going to really latch onto. They're going to bring them together. They're going to start using the technologies in tandem. I already was excited about that, but our conversation today has increased my enthusiasm. So thank you again for being here, and I wish you the very best.
You bet. Glad to be here.
Thanks for tuning in to Transform Now. For more insightful discussions on digital transformation and more, check out our podcast channel where you'll find all of our previous episodes. And to make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you like what you've heard, please leave us a review. For more information about digital transformation and the future of work, check out blueprism.com to learn how SS&C Blue Prism's digital workforce is enabling enterprise transformation now.